Donald Trump and Elon Musk have a major falling out over the big, beautiful bill. The economy outperforms expectations as the Trump administration prepares to finalize a long list of trade deals. Israel continues its ground offensive in Gaza, recovering the remains of several hostages. And finally, are the U.S. and Israel preparing to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities? You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Mensch-Kight Geopolitics is your home for conservative commentary on international affairs with an eye toward Israel and the Middle East. I'm your host, Isaac Kight, your lovable lawnsman, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your shadow president, and your prophet of things to come. Welcome back, insiders, the smartest people in the world, the most well-informed, the most erudite. You get a bonus of several IQ points just for listening. Mention the insiders, the greatest audience ever. And there are more and more of you by the day. I know I'm in a rebrand. There was a little bit of a drop-off. I think people have been a little over-newsed. There's been just too much going on. It's blasting from all angles, but we are so back, my friends. Not just the show, but America. We are so back. It's not even funny. A lot of good news, a lot of good things to talk about. So many things that I'm going to have to run, verbally speaking, in order to get through all of it. So there's all this. And right now, it's going down in the Middle East. We're evacuating civilians and unnecessary personnel, or non-essential personnel, I should say, from the embassies in the Middle East. We are preparing for war, apparently. Fighter jets have taken off in Israel, a large number. There's fueling planes that have taken off from Saudi Arabia, U.S. bases there. And Donald Trump is about to announce that he's done trying to negotiate with Iran. More on that in a bit. I'm going to start with U.S. stuff and talk a little bit about some of this stuff. Everybody's been asking me, Isaac, what's your psak on Musk and Trump? And I've got to go. Oh, for those of you who don't know, psak means like your legal ruling. It's a little Hebrew term we throw around. It's commonly like, what's your opinion? And as a yid, I've got two, so a very strong opinion. Opinion, ego, get that, in plentiful supply for you. All right. So you guys know I'm Team Trump. I've been on the Trump train for some time, with the Trump agenda. I support his policies, 90% of them. His approach to Russia and Ukraine, I've been critical, and you can't support everything a president does. I'm happy to support so much. Right. It's nice having a president where I don't have to be like, 60-40, 70-30. In this case, Trump is doing a pretty good job domestically on most issues, and I'm just grateful that someone is dealing with some of these problems. That said, I am Team Musk on the cuts. Elon Musk is right that there need to be deeper cuts, and I'm with that. I think he's wrong to blow up at Trump. The things he said were extremely inappropriate. The Epstein thing is utter nonsense. And even Michael Cohen, the Trump's former attorney who turned on him and has been doing all the, saying all this crazy mishigat. It is nonsense, nutty stuff that's been coming out of his mouth. He's like, Trump and the Epstein files, that's nonsense. I mean, it's whatever. My friends, as I've said for a long time, the one name we know isn't on the Epstein list is Donald Trump. Because if his name had been, he'd have been the one person that would have been prosecuted. I mean, they were going after him for, 37 counts of inappropriate accounting, supposed business fraud or, whatever nonsense in New York. And, for a phone call he had with the Secretary of State in Georgia. I mean, they were going after him they're grasping at straws. Okay, if they really had anything on Donald Trump, they'd have nailed him with it. Last thought on that: someone once asked Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks guy, where's the dirt on Trump? Well, why is that hidden? And Assange replied, well, there isn't any. right? The most frustrating thing for the establishment regarding Donald Trump is that the man's clean as a whistle. The worst thing he's done is a few inappropriate payments, so they say. I mean, if you twist the law, you can say, well, maybe these payments weren't perfectly on the whatever, done right. What he did was legal. There was just, the questions about the accounting or whatever. And then they blew it up to a whole bunch of nonsense. Like his phone calls with Ukraine and with, the Secretary of State in Georgia. There's nothing there. But they keep trying to prosecute him over stuff that, because they have nothing. If they had anything real, believe me, we'd know because, they'd have nailed him with it. They're frustrated that they can't. Anyway, now Musk is toning it down. He's like, look, I'm sorry. I said some things. And, Trump said that Musk has been using ketamine. So my sock on this issue, if you want to know, the ruling of the I don't want the great Isaac, Lord Isaac is just Musk made some mistakes and he needs to tone it down. He's right on the cuts issue, but he needs to be a little more patient, I think. So, we all make mistakes. Elon has been pushing it, and I think he's worked himself a little too hard, and now he needs to take a little time to chill. But if, he's been talking about creating a new political party, I don't know if that's, necessary, but it would be nice to see him and some other little more libertarian-leaning business leaders like himself, push for put money into the primaries to help our conservative candidates get elected. For years and years and years, my friends, I've been working for that underdog Republican. One of my good buddies in Texas used to be in California. We were in California politics working forever. Ed, you know who you are. We walked precincts, we made phone calls, we handed out handed out flyers at grocery stores, we hung door hangers, we did all the things. Working for these long shot, shoestring conservative candidates who were good people with good values, to try to get, cuts and to have someone who was socially conservative on the ballot. All these things. We did all of these things for years and no one gave us the time of day. And the establishment just put more money toward their insider candidates, the good old boys who were just going to go along to get along in Congress and all that. If we had some help there, we could get some really good people into Congress. There are better people out there. Okay? We can get good candidates. So, if Elon, if you want to help, please, that's the place to help. That's the way to go. Okay. So, that's that. I'm glad to see that Elon toned it down and whatever, but it looks like the bromance is over. And I hate to say it. I mean, I have to make the jokes, my friends. I heard them, so you have to hear them. The joke that the breakup between Trump and Musk is the gayest thing in Pride Month. It's bad. But anyway, the bromance broke down. But I mean, we're still the good guys, all right? And they're still working on their stuff. So unfortunate, but that is done. So, jokes aside, though, I hope Elon, he's starting to get his head right, and hopefully he'll be back to being, a team player and a good guy once again. Okay, the economy, my friends. How many times have I said it here that there's not going to be a recession, that there's nothing in the numbers that suggests recession. There's been some uncertainty, but that the uncertainty would be gone soon. On and on and on I've gone saying it's going to be okay. Well, recession fears on, Polymarket, the likelihood of a recession. Now, granted, that is a gambling site, right? Like people are betting on things. It's a betting site. Anyway, the fears have gone from 70% to 20%. People have figured out what I was telling you. And, a year ago, I was telling you that Trump was a viable candidate and had a good chance of winning. So, I mean, if you listen to this podcast, you're in the know. You know what's going on. You're not surprised by things. Well, this will not surprise you because I've been saying as much. The inflation rate is better than is expected. No surprise. So, all these people, the tariffs are going to cause terrible inflation. Trump's going to destroy the economy. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Inflation's down. consumer prices on key consumer goods, eggs, fuel, things of that nature, are down. They are actually down. Like, that is contra-inflationary. Okay, that's we call it deflationary pressures, but I mean, we don't want to talk about that because we're not anywhere near deflation. Just the point is we're getting less inflation and prices are coming down and we are getting more bang for our buck. Our purchasing power is increasing, my friends. That's what we voted for. Jobs numbers continue to beat expectations. The economy is growing. The American people are becoming wealthier. Wages, my friends, wages are up 0.8%. Wage growth is just miserable in this country. Like, wages have been flat for 50 years, basically. And when Trump's been in office, we've seen reasonable growth in wages. So last November, I voted for Donald Trump. And 6 months later, wages are up. Consumer prices are, prices for key consumer goods are down, and inflation is down. I got what I voted for, and I am very happy about it. So that is a good thing. Now, there has been some uncertainty about the tariff negotiations. I said that would be temporary. They're working on the deals. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick just posted the other day that starting next week, that we're just going to have a long string of trade deal announcements. They're finalizing these deals. Trump has been going back and forth with Xi Jinping, president of China, talking about different things. I need to do some deep dive into China a little bit here. I'll do a little bit this episode, but I don't really have time. But let's just say the Chinese economy is in desperate shape. So Xi needs a deal. But we've been going back and forth on a lot of things. And we're hearing now that the terms for a deal have been worked out, and Trump wants to go over there and meet with Xi in person to hammer out the final thing and make the announcement. Optics. Okay, so Trump's being tough, but I mean, he's not being unreasonable. Okay, we're getting the deals. Mark Carney, the new prime minister in Canada. I'm sorry you guys voted for that guy, but anyway, he's said he wants to get a deal done with Trump ASAP along free trade lines. So we're getting good stuff. All right. So these deals are going to be worked out. A lot of them are coming this summer. We've already got one with the UK. I mean, basically, after the first 6 or 7 deals, our largest trading partners like China, Japan, Mexico, Canada, obviously the biggest ones, after these deals go through, we're going to have the uncertainty will be gone. We're going to have a booming economy, my friends. So, that we're getting there, and it's worth the uncertainty. It's worth just a little bit of pain. It hasn't been very painful, has it? It's worth a little bit of pain to get there and rebalance the trade situation. All right. I just wanted to go there because, we've been hearing these naysayers of acting like Trump's destroying the economy, doesn't know what he's doing, hasn't a clue. Yeah, Trump's advisor, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, is really brilliant. I watch every video he puts out. I watch his tweets religiously. The guy knows his stuff. Trump's so bigoted that he hired a gay man to be his Secretary of Treasury and one of his principal advisors. In the American system, we don't have a prime minister. If we had a prime minister, we basically kind of have two. We have a very powerful Secretary of State. Marco Rubio is doing all the jobs in the U.S. government right now. It's like, you look at half the jobs in the government, it's Marco Rubio. He's doing a lot of our foreign policy, and he's doing a great job. He's a masterful job. And Scott Bessent is running a lot of domestic policy, economic policy internationally, and what have you. Scott Bessent is probably the most powerful and prominent Secretary of the Treasury since Alexander Hamilton, of whom I am a great fan. And it's brilliant. So, Bessent has brilliantly laid this thing out. The economy is about to go gangbusters. Bessent was just talking about how net receipts are up. So the net receipts, tax revenue is up. The Treasury is receiving more money than it received this time last year. In April, receipts were up almost 10%. In May, they're up almost 15% over the same month last year. The economy is growing. More taxes are being paid. That's one of the indicators. We're making money, okay? The economy is growing. And 15% increase over last year, that's huge. And over a 10% increase from in April. I mean, that just shows you it doesn't take long. Trump's changes to the economy, the optimism, they're good. What we need now is the big, beautiful bill. So that's what Trump and Musk were arguing over. Musk thinks that the bill doesn't cut enough. There's been some back and forth. Real quick, let's get to the heart of the matter. The big, beautiful bill is a reconciliation bill. Budget reconciliation, it's stupid, my friends. It's inane. Ted Cruz explains all of this over on The Verdict, so I listen to him. I really like what Ted has to say about these things, and he has some ideas for more cuts, so more on that in a second. But because it's budget reconciliation, that means two things. One, it's not subject to the cloture vote. The Republicans have a 53-seat majority in the Senate out of 100, right? But because of the 60-vote cloture vote, you'd have to get 7 Democrats to vote with the Republicans to end debate. The Democrats are just lockstep, goose-stepping, if you will, about how they don't want Trump to have any victories. So the best way to get this done is through budget reconciliation. And you can do minor changes with budget reconciliation, but you can't put major policies in there. It's kind of pushing it that we got the no tax on tips and a bunch of other stuff into the big, beautiful bill. That said, it passed the House of Representatives by 1 vote. The Republican majority in the House is so close that we need every Nancy Nutter and every Norman Nutter to vote for it. I'll talk more about the House dynamics here in a second. But 1 vote, right? Put that bill in front of the Senate. And Ted Cruz says that he thinks the Senate's going to be a little bit more conservative. It's usually the other way around. Usually the Senate adds money to bills, but he thinks the Senate's going to cut more out of the bill. And then, of course, the legislative process, there will be a committee, joint committee of both houses to come up with a common version of the bill to get the Senate bill and the House bill to agree, right? Get them into one form, and then both houses will repass it. And they don't need the cloture vote in the Senate for either of these votes. Once it's been passed in its final form, it goes to the president's desk and Trump will sign it. And we need that. That's big delivery for Trump's agenda. I think the key controversy on this bill is the 2.4 trillion cuts. First of all, we get these terms, 2.4 trillion over 10 years. That's not, it sounds like a big chunk of money, but it's over 10 years. I like annual figures, but annual figures require intelligence, because if I tell you, well, there's 150 billion in cuts this year and 200 next year, and then 220 the year after, that gets complicated. So it's just easier for people to say, well, over the next 10 years, it's 2.4 trillion in cuts. The CBO has said that they don't think that's going to be true. And the reason they say that is because they do the math funny. They always put U.S. growth figures at like 1.7% or some dumb thing like that. The U.S. economy always grows at about 2%, and we're going to be growing faster than that. At this point, with the way the economy looks, we're going to be seeing much better growth, especially once we have the tax cuts. And they never account for that kind of stuff. Conservative economists have looked at it and said, yes, the cuts are there. The deficit will be reduced. It's good. But that's where the controversy was. And Musk just doesn't trust Congress. Well, who does, right? But we need this bill to pass. It has a lot of the agenda in it. There need to be some deeper cuts in it. And then it goes through. Then we need to continue. Right, the House just passed another bill, taking another $9 billion out of U.S. aid and cutting off PBS and NPR. Right, these government funding for propaganda. Right, that bill just passed the House. That'll go to the Senate. Obviously, the big beautiful bill will come first, but we'll need to get that done. So little bit by little bit, the DOGE cuts will be coming through Congress, and we'll be getting those codified. Not all of those cuts require legislation or an act of Congress, but some of them do. But again, the narrow majority in the House. So Speaker Johnson was on Uncommon Knowledge. Uncommon Knowledge is a Hoover Institute podcast. Very good podcast. Peter Robinson, great interviewer. It's a good podcast. Very professional, very academic, very elite and educated and educational. Very good podcast. And he had an interview with Mike Johnson. I highly recommend it. It's good 45 minutes of your life. If you listen to it, you'll find good info there. And Speaker Johnson talked about some of the things that are in that bill, some of the things it does and doesn't do. There's all kind of claims about it. And he explains all that stuff. But he also talks about how they have a much broader reform agenda. They're going to get the DOGE cuts in. They're going to do entitlement reform. There's a lot more coming. Okay. Good interview. The best thing that came out of that interview is this question of the midterms. And, can Republicans gain seats? Because if the Democrats gain any seats, then they'll have the majority. Then they'll, stonewall. There'll be nothing, the GOP is going to keep the Senate almost certainly at this point. They will shut Congress down for, 2 years. Right. Congress will be completely closed. It'll be useless. Now, if we can get our reform agenda done between now and then, it won't matter. Right. But they're going to do everything they can to stifle the Trump agenda. They're going to impeach Trump on the first day. They'll elect Hakeem Jeffries speaker and then immediately vote, articles of impeachment against Trump. And that'll be the end of that. I mean, it's going to be a mess. Could Republicans gain? Speaker Johnson is optimistic, and so am I. And here is why. First of all, only twice in the last 90 years has the president's party gained seats in the House in the midterms, right? The first midterms after the election. 1934, under FDR, the Democrats gained seats in part because he tried to implement the agenda he was elected, the New Deal. That agenda didn't work. I made reference to it last time, and a couple of people thought, are you trying to imply that the New Deal ended the Depression and da-da-da-da? No, that wasn't what I was trying to say. The Depression eventually ended, is what I was trying to get at, but the New Deal actually exacerbated it. It made it worse on the whole and in large part. And, we ended up having a recession during the recovery from a depression, which economically, according to the laws of economics, should not be able to happen. Like that shouldn't even be possible. But, hey, it happened, and that shows you how bad the New Deal policies really were. The other time the president's party gained seats was in 2002 during George W. Bush's first term. We had 9/11 and the tax cuts. The Republicans delivered on the agenda that Bush was elected to implement, and then we had 9/11, and so Republicans gained seats. And then Bush immediately squandered that with the war in Iraq, but I won't go into that. In any case, that was one of those administrations where I was a little bit more, I look back now, I'm a little bit more 70-30. When I was younger, I liked the tax cuts at the time as a young working class liberal, but I did not like, No Child Left Behind. It destroyed education and made a mess of things. And the war in Iraq, I mean, it's like, anyway, I can go on about that stuff. But could this happen again? Could the president's party, could the Republicans gain seats? Well, Speaker Johnson made a point. There are 13 Democrats who hold seats in Congress, in the House of Representatives, where Donald Trump won a majority in their districts in the last election, right? That's generally considered a vulnerable seat when the other party's presidential candidate won your district, right? By contrast, there are only 3 Republicans sitting in Democrat seats, in seats where Kamala Harris won the majority. So if you look at that, if those seats all changed hands during the election, if the Republicans lost those 3 seats where Harris had won, they probably won't lose all, but let's just say they did for the sake of argument, and the Democrats lost all the seats where Trump won, the GOP would gain 10 seats net, right? So there's a really good opportunity. And I talked about after the election gathering in. Now that Trump has won, a lot of people voted for Trump and also voted Democrat. To get those people who voted Democrat back into the party, not back, but to get those people to vote Republican down ticket, you need to show them that you're going to implement Trump's agenda. And that's why the big, beautiful bill is so important. That at least, and more needs to pass, but at least that needs to pass. So there's a good chance that GOP could gain some seats. 3 or 4 seats really would help. 5, 6, 7, 8, that would be beautiful. If we could get something like that, it would really help pass legislation, because unfortunately, as Speaker Johnson talks about during that interview, you've got Republican representatives who are in districts that are, R+20, and they can vote very conservatively. But you have Republicans who are in districts that are R+5, and they have to be careful how they vote because they might not be reelected. You have representatives that are in districts with much older populations where they have to be careful about seniors issues. You have Republicans that are in districts where there are other particular farming issues. And if you make cuts toward farming, certain farmers might be upset. So you have to be careful with these interests from an electoral point of view. But the more Republicans there are in the House, the better chance we'll be able to get this legislation through. Hopefully we'll be able to get most of it done this term. But if the GOP could gain, we can get continue the reform agenda and double down on Trump's policies in 27 and 28 and go into the next presidential election in a much better position, the whole country, the economy and everything. The economy, by the time these trade deals, the economy is going to be gangbusters. It'll all look good. All of the other circumstances that we need, growing economy, general optimism, all that kind of stuff. Okay. That'll be there for the next election. But Isaac, they'll probably still lose seats. Normally I would agree, but a magical thing just happened. Gallup has been tracking, do you think the country's headed in the right direction? And they've been tracking this for years. It's never been a positive number. There's never been a vast majority of Americans who are saying that the country's headed in the right direction. For the first time ever since they've been tracking this poll, a majority of Americans believe that more Americans, a plurality, I should say, but it's a yes or no question. But more Americans say the country is headed in the right direction than in the wrong direction. That's optimism. All we have to do is continue to implement the Trump agenda and Republicans will win. Okay. And the demographic shifts and all the changes that are happening everything's headed in the right direction. So that's there. Entitlement reform is coming. It has to happen. We need work requirements for Medicaid. We need, there needs to be reform to Medicare. If we want to keep that solvent and keep it running, the tax cuts will build more revenue. That'll help. The growing economy will help pump money into these entitlement programs, but they are going to need some reform. Getting a whole bunch of people off of Social Security who shouldn't be on it, who are overseas and or otherwise not entitled, people who are over 120, getting those people off. 12 million people removed from the Social Security rolls for being over 120. I mean, come on, people. Wow. That all helps. We're getting there. Okay. We're getting there. So check out that interview. Optimism toward the midterms. We're generally headed in the right direction. Okay. Now, with all that, the Democrats have decided to stage a rally in support of the GOP. And I can't say enough to thank them. The Democrats have done, the left has done a great job for us here. I'm so excited about this. What could be better, right? The Democrats have supported the riots in Los Angeles, right? You got Gavin Newsom saying that, reaction. You got Karen Bass, the mayor there in Los Angeles. Trump escalated this, and all the media. They're mostly peaceful protests. Yeah, with police cars set on fire and them throwing bricks and cinder blocks at law enforcement officers. I mean, shooting fireworks at them. That's all dangerous stuff. I mean, don't sound, they're just shooting fireworks. Fireworks are dangerous. People lose fingers and take serious injuries every year from screwing around with fireworks, right? When I'm out doing some fireworks with my children, we maintain maximum safety. Gloves, people stand back. Nobody looks down the barrel of the mortar, these kinds of things. When doing the Roman candles, even the my younger children, holding up the Roman candles, very careful about it. Okay. You have to be very careful with fireworks. They are dangerous. So with all of this, it's just, you look at the numbers. Trump's opinion poll numbers have risen. His favorability is up 4% in this poll, 6% in that poll. His favorability is rising. Gavin Newsom's has fallen. He's about 1/3 of people in the country have a favorable opinion of Gavin Newsom and very high unfavorables. This, combined with the fires, we already had the incompetence over the fires. This has finished Gavin Newsom. It's really funny because he's probably the best candidate the Democrats have. They wouldn't want to nominate him because he's a white man. He's actually a charismatic speaker. I've met Gavin Newsom a few times. Not a fan, but I've met him a few times. I've shaken his hand. He's a charismatic speaker, and he talks about all kinds of great things that are coming in his grand utopian vision. None of it's true, but I could see how somebody less educated and not aware of what's really going on or what he really means when he says this or that could be taken in by it. But he's not what they're looking for. He's not a black woman. Not to mention that, well, neither is Kamala Harris, but anyway, he couldn't get nominated. And even so, his numbers are terrible. At this point, he could not win a presidential election, even against a bad Republican candidate. Right. So That's beautiful. The riots in Los Angeles have basically given us the GOP campaign ads for the midterms, right? So you'll have booming economy. Picture, just imagine the ads for, I'm Isaac Kite. I'm running for Congress in the whatever district of Kansas, let's just say, America, a country with, hardworking people, pictures of farmers and factory workers. And, we're getting America. America's back. We're so back. We're getting good trade deals. The economy is growing gangbusters. Meanwhile, our opponents are burning down cities and throwing rocks at police officers and all this. Anyway, let's talk about some numbers real quick. The American people favor Trump's immigration policies by 20 percentage points, especially among Latinos and African Americans, key demographics for the Dems. Bad news for them. A majority of Americans support sending in the Marines. We just found out the Marines are going to help the National Guard. You had 4,000 National Guard personnel there and 700 Marines. They are not taking on the rioters. They are protecting the ICE employees and the federal buildings there, and they're guarding sites since, there've been some idiots being arrested for doxing ICE employees. People, these nutters are going to show up at their houses and start threatening their families. So we have to protect those too. But the ICE officials need protection to go along with them and escort to do their jobs. And they've been deporting a lot of illegals. The American people support this. So the Democrats this is completely falling flat. We're tired of the violence. The American people are over it. And it's just, as the Dems used to say, read the room. Well, Democrats, read the room. The American people are fed up. Go home, get a job, get a life. I just want that, my last thought on this, I really want them to figure out the organizations that are financing this. We've seen a couple of different organizations. There's this one, Indivisible. It's backed by a couple of communists, unfortunately, with Jewish names. Like I said, half the Jews are secular leftists. They're nutters, what can I say? But Soros funded, right? And they're the ones out with the No Kings campaign. Donald Trump was elected. He's doing what the American people wanted. That's not a king. Okay. Kings are like King Charles. Did anyone in Britain vote for King Charles? If they'd had a choice, like if it had been a choice between, Charles, Prince William, anyone else, Prince Edward, did they have a vote? Did they have an elect? No, he was the next in line. Nobody likes King Charles. Like he's not a popular guy. He's just there. And basically he's filling in until his son, Prince William, takes over, whom, everyone's just waiting. Well, how long until, we get the gentleman in office and, get rid of this loser. So, this is this kind of thing. Anyway, the point is the riots are, they're doing everything for us and this kind of stuff, but we've got to figure out who's financing these, and these organizations need to be prosecuted. They need to be fined. They need to be sued. The people who are sponsoring this violence, who are dropping off the pallets of bricks and all of that, find them, take away their nonprofit status, put their leaders in prison, prosecute them. They've certainly violated some law, even if it's 30 days in the county clink. I don't care. Prosecute them. If you go after these people, then they will have to stop playing these kinds of games and pulling these shenanigans. All right. On a positive note, as I told you guys a few episodes back, I met a couple of very bright young gentlemen at my cigar club in Dallas. Very exclusive cigar club. Actually, we're pretty down-to-earth guys there. Anyway, we're at our club there, and chatting to these two guys, two young Catholic theology students studying religion, and we had a great conversation, great young guys. And I was commenting to them, it's like, look, the Catholic Church is the largest institution of moral authority in the Western world, right? And probably the largest single religious institution in the world in terms of its membership, adherence, and its ability to get a message out. It could be a very powerful force for solid Western values, for reinforcing the values we all share. Family, peace, love, and all this good stuff, right? The woke agenda that Francis was pushing, it's not helpful. So, could we see some reform here? There'd be huge benefit to this. Well, Leo the 14th has been on the pro-family agenda. He's an American. That's awesome. And he's been on the pro-family agenda, and it's a really good thing to see. I'm excited about it. I'm a Yid. I'm not a Catholic. I have a lot of Catholic friends, and those two young gentlemen in particular, we drew out that conversation. That was really powerful. But I'm just glad to see that they have a good leadership. Mazel tov to the church for getting, a decent guy in charge. And, by God, let's all of us, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox Christian, Jewish, those of us who believe in traditional values as Westerners, even, there are even, seculars and atheists who believe in traditional Western values. Let's all get together and sing in the same choir. Okay, at this point, we're all on the same side. We all support families. We all want faith. We want belief. We want morality, decency, human decency, kindness, all that good stuff. And we want to call out the bad guys, the terrorists, the evil people who are promoting harm. Who want to mutilate. They want to engage in the forced sterilization and genital mutilation of children, mentally ill children, and this kind of stuff. We've got to call those people out and point to them and say, that is wrong. That is evil. That is not good. And promote what is good. Healthy families. And I should know, I have 7 children. Love each and every one of them. So glad to see that we're on the same agenda there. All right. Take a break here. Want to get on some of the international news and talk about so many other things to talk about. So come back to all that shortly.
This is Eamon's Minute, where I tell you a cool story from history. Today we'll be talking about Hannibal's setup for the Battle of Cannae. After the last battle at Lake Laguna, he then has a goal. After that battle, people are starting to idolize him. So then, he starts thinking about what he'll do if he wins. He wants to weaken Rome and turn it into a vassal state. He wants to break a bat over its head. And then he heads over to Cannae in order to do some resupplying. And then the Romans and consuls have decided to send 80,000 men to go and chase after him. And this is the setup for the greatest battle in Roman history, and one of the greatest defeats.
And that's Eamon's Minute. Back to you, Dad.
You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics with Isaac Kite. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. Now you're messing with a son of a mensch. All right, and we're back. I just wanted to mention there's an episode of The Casual Historian. Grant did a great episode on the history of the founding of Israel. Very honest. There's a lot of good information there. He even talks about the Irgun and Lehigh and all this stuff that, the people who weren't so great when Israel was founded. And nobody said that we're all perfect or anything, but, he has a really good explanation of the founding of Israel and a lot of the conflict that happened in the British Mandate of Palestine. Worth a watch. Check that out. Casual Historian, History of Israel. Great episode. It's just good to see people who are honest about things. And he takes down a lot of the people who say, they have these crazy theories about Israel's founding. It's good that he does that because there's a lot of stupid stuff out there. That's why you can't take a lot of historians seriously. Anyway, we just had the selfie flotilla, Greta Thunberg, who will be, I'll remember her most from Ricky Gervais's speech at the one of these Hollywood shows, and he's like, most of you have less education, spend less time in a classroom than Greta Thunberg. So he's great. But this lady's out there. First of all, we get all these people, you're picking on a child. She's 22 now, people. She's not any more intelligent. When she was a child, it was, they were engaging in, her parents were engaging in child abuse, putting this little girl out for, autistic girl out for criticism. saying stupid things on TV and embarrassing herself and making herself look stupid. Way to use someone. So anyway, they did their little selfie flotilla, and they were diverted because they found migrants in the sea, and the migrants jumped overboard, and so they went and rescued some of them, and just dumb stuff. They got to Israel, Shayetet, the Shayetet 13 unit, the naval commandos, really great guys. Shalom, gentlemen. Hope you guys are having a great day. They landed, took control of the boat with no trouble. All of the selfie flotilla people threw their phones in the water, like they've got information on there that Israel wants. Nobody cares. So apparently pollution's bad, but not if you're a sea turtle. Like, it's okay to pollute the Mediterranean when, the Israelis show up. No hypocrisy detected. Anyway, they were taken to Israel. They got sandwiches. They were shown a video about October 7th, which they refused to watch, of course, because, they don't want to see the truth. And then they were deported. They were put on a flight, taken hostage by Israel. Oh my God, the first hostage in the world, where we want to get rid of her as fast as possible. And she got to sit on the back of the plane with a chair that doesn't recline next to the bathroom. So hope that was an enjoyable experience. We had all these jokes about the babies were crying the whole flight because they didn't want to be next to Greta Thunberg. You can't make this stuff up, people. They are so crazy, my friends. They are so crazy. Anyway, the Israeli offensive goes on in Gaza. We've recovered at this point 5 or 6 bodies of hostages that were taken. At least those remains can go back to Israel and be interred properly. They can get the proper burial. That's very important in Judaism. And it's. Anyway, so the number of total hostages, dead or alive, is down almost to 50 now, getting closer and closer to that number. We don't know how many are still alive, but we want all of them back. So, Israel's offensive continues, and Gaza must be destroyed. Hamas must be destroyed. Gaza must be liberated. They can't be allowed to continue. Meanwhile, Hamas is murdering aid workers and taking them hostage. They killed 5 aid workers that were handing out food to people. If there's starvation in Gaza, it's not the international aid system or Israel that is responsible. It's Hamas. The more desperate they become, the more atrocities they are committing. They are a cancer to Arab and Jew alike. So it's time that we destroy Hamas. Of course, I'm going to be talking about the financiers of Hamas shortly. Obviously, U.S. aid is no longer financing the terror tunnels, but Iran is, and we need to cut that off. So, anyway, but the Israeli offensive has been very effective. We're getting remains back from hostages. They continue to whack these terrorists, and they're securing more and more of Gaza and providing security for Israelis, because there have been more rocket attacks and that kind of thing. This has to stop. Like, the violence from Gaza has to stop. No wonder half the people there want to leave. Let's let them go to Libya. Anyway, a couple of interesting thoughts on Israeli politics. While I be quick here, there have been a few polls out, and you get these polls, should Bibi be prime minister and all these kinds of things, and you have to take polls with a grain of salt. But there have been a couple lately. Who is most fit to be prime minister? And Bibi tops that poll by quite a bit, by double digits. So, he's got elections coming up by the end of next year. By the end of 2026, he has to face elections. As I've said, as long as the conflict is ongoing, we've got tensions with Iran, we got problems in Gaza, there won't be elections. But things have settled down in the north with Hezbollah cut off and Syria under thumb. So at least there's that. But the Gaza front is still a problem. That needs to be finished. And, we still have to deal with Iran. Meanwhile, there's the Houthis firing rockets and stuff. The Israeli Navy has fired on the Houthis. They're finally, engaging in some ground attack. So they have attacked Houthi targets and caused significant damage there. And Israeli planes can fly down the Red Sea and bomb the Houthis as well. So, so far, so good. The Israeli Navy is growing stronger and more powerful, and they're able to project force farther from Israel's borders. And that shows that Israel is truly becoming a regional power. And that's exactly what Bibi said. He said he would make Israel a regional, a world power, as he said, but at the very least a regional power. And that is happening. So then we get Iran. I've told you, there hasn't been much progress on what kind of negotiations are happening. We haven't heard much. Trump apparently is at the end of his rope, and he said they had 60 days. Back in April, he said they had 60 days to come to a deal. They haven't come to a deal, and now he's going to, end negotiations. So there's been talk about whether the U.S. would allow some enrichment to go on or not. We can't allow any enrichment. The Iranians are enriching uranium to levels that are far beyond the need for civilian power, right? They're distinctly trying to make weapons-grade uranium. So that can't be allowed. We can't let them have a bomb. And so there's talk of bombing their nuclear facilities. As I'm telling you this now, we're getting reports that, non-essential personnel and civilians are being evacuated from embassies, and U.S. bases in the Middle East are on high alert. Tanker planes are in the air. Israeli fighters have been seen taking off in large numbers. Something is being prepared. Hopefully, the Ayatollahs will come to their senses, but apparently they think that they can take on the whole world, and they may get what's coming to them. If that regime is taken out, if that regime falls, and from what I'm hearing from people who know people in Iran, some people are worried about the possibility of conflict, but there's a lot of optimism. There are a lot of people there who are really tired of the government. They're tired of the economic circumstances they find themselves in, cut off from the world by sanctions. I don't know if it's enough, but one can hope. If that regime goes away, then the Middle East will calm down. Because right now, the financiers of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and the source of all the trouble, the return address for all the problems in the Middle East, not all of them, but most of the problems in the Middle East right now, is in Tehran. This needs to stop. So hopefully action will be taken soon, and we will see what happens. So my next episode, I may be, doing some analysis of Israel's bombing of Iran. And that would be beautiful. The U.S. may join in too. To get to the real nuclear sites, they require much heavier munitions, the kind of munitions Israel doesn't have. Several bunker busters are going to have to be dropped on each of these bunkers. I mean, we're talking about like B-2 kind of stuff. We're going to need a big bomber to go over there and drop heavy munitions on these underground nuclear facilities and destroy them. It can be done, and I hope the Trump administration does. We've looked really weak with the way that their Russia policy has gone. And, finally they've stood up to Xi and China on trade. But when it comes to Iran, we need to put the foot down. We can't show weakness to these people. These people will if you give them an inch, they'll take 10 miles. That's how these people are. So don't give them the inch. It's time to end that regime. So we will see what happens, but I'm glad to see some results happening. The negotiations have been, like I said, we've been hearing this and that. It's up in the air. Trump said there would be no enrichment allowed. That was the last we heard, and now we're not negotiating anymore. They're not taking us seriously. Well, maybe they'll take our bombs more seriously. So when I get back, a little bit more about China and things going on there. And of course, Ukraine's masterful attack on Russia's strategic bomber force. Right. It's time to talk about China a little bit. I hate to do that. I'm old enough to remember when. Actually, I don't remember this from my childhood, but I do remember a little bit from later on. During the era of Deng Xiaoping, who arose to be the successor to Mao, basically, he created the one country, two systems policy, where you have the free market and the communist system, and basically, as long as the party could stay in power, they were willing to allow the economy to grow. But then they had the protests in Tiananmen Square, which they put down violently. And to this day, we don't know how many people were killed. Something like 10,000 people were killed there. So their policy has been basically they do not allow the people to have any choice. Like the people have no say. And they want to make sure the people know that they have no say. outside the Communist Party, which means that, the Communist Party is in charge. So that's basically their system. People in China have whatever freedom in quotation marks that the government allows them to have, so long as the party is in power and it's the party's idea. But during that era, the 80s, the 90s, as we headed into Deng retired and the Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao years, before Xi Jinping came to power, during those years, there was this phenomenon where, yes, you had the big leader, the big name guy, but other officials in the government would make major policy statements. And then, this governor had this idea and this minister had this idea. And when Xi Jinping came to power, very quickly that stopped. Everything in the news is about Xi Jinping. Nobody else exists. You wouldn't know that China has a premier or any ministers or any of that kind of thing. It's all Xi Jinping. If you watch their news or listen to their news or read their news, it's Xi. Everything is about how great Xi is, Chairman Xi. He's like, the new Mao, right? He's the reincarnation of Mao Zedong in the Chinese system. Well, something interesting happened recently. A series of economic reforms have been proposed, and they're being proposed by people other than Xi Jinping. Now, that doesn't mean Xi's power has been weakened. He's probably doing this so that he can avoid any kind of responsibility if there are problems. But Li Qiang, the premier, I'm probably butchering these names. Forgive me, my Chinese pronunciation is not very good. I have a few Chinese friends I've talked with over the years, and I've tried to ask them about philosophers and that kind of stuff, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So my pronunciations are not great. Apologies ahead of time. Just like with my Hebrew, every now and then I apologize to Israeli listeners for my thick American accent. Anyway, Prime Minister Li Qiang has been proposing a more Deng-style economic system, right? One country, two systems. Again, they're talking about free market economic reforms. They're talking about allowing the private markets to do more. They're going to try to stimulate the economy. Mostly, it's all talk. What we're seeing is this is cover for the Chinese banking system and the party and whatever to pump a bunch of funny money into the economy, which is generally how leftists drive economic growth. But when you look at the real numbers, the Chinese economy is still in terrible pain. There has been a 13% drop in oil purchases by China. China is buying 13% less oil at a time when, Russia is desperate to sell its oil to China. That's huge. I mean, that is an economic indicator right there. Okay. You can't produce anything without energy. And yes, China has some coal, and yes, they've done all this green nonsense. It's not actually hooked up to anything. They don't actually, use this stuff, but they make it look pretty. So they can take pictures of, oh, look, we have lots of wind and whatever. But most power is generated by coal. But without oil and without coal, you can't make anything, right? All that production requires power. And really the only way to generate power, real power, profitable power, is with coal or oil. And that just shows you the Chinese economy is in deep trouble. So they're trying to reform their system a little bit. They're trying to push some ideas. Some of the ministers have been talking. Sounds like she might be trying to balance things a little bit. After all, with facing, in the People's Congress, I refuse to call it the Chinese People's Congress. I like to call it the Chinese National Congress because, I just don't use their nomenclature. You know what I mean? It's just kind of dumb. Anyway, the Chinese Congress has different factions, and the Mao and Deng factions have been kind of ganging up on Xi. So he's been in a little bit of trouble there. This might be his attempt to try to balance things a little bit. So just a thing there to consider. But the economy there is not good. We keep hearing all kinds of things going wrong there. And, it could just fall apart. What's funny to me, and this goes back to the tariff thing. So you get all these people that are, Trump's tariffs. They act like we had a choice. Things would have just kept humming along if Trump hadn't gone and done his tariffs. That's not true. Peter Zion and a lot of other people out there have been talking about China's forthcoming collapse. All the experts have been talking about it. There could be a day when the Chinese economy just stops and our orders from China just stop coming. And we're seeing the pain in the Chinese economy right now as we push for fairer trade policies. That shows you how vulnerable they are. and how weak they are and how close we were to that occasion. But I'd rather live in a world where that instant, when that happens, that doesn't mean the end of our pharmaceuticals and, consumer goods. We're aware of the problem now. We're going to make more of that stuff here or in other countries that we have better trade relations with, and go from there. But China's in big trouble. I mean, it is, China Update, great podcast there. Market Update's okay too, but China Update is a really good podcast, on YouTube. Very good show. Been enjoying that. Talking about all the different things that are happening in China, and the news is not good. It's not good out of China. All right. Real quick. Oh my God. Ukraine has done a master stroke. I was just sitting down at Shabbat dinner with some friends recently, and we were talking about different things, and they were asking me about, how are drones going to influence, because they've been listening to Musk and other people. And I'm like, look, small autonomous drones could go out and destroy aircraft. I mean, it doesn't, some of these airplanes, an F-35 or even, Russian planes, these are sophisticated planes that are very fragile. And, it wouldn't take much to damage them, put them out of commission, let alone destroy them. Right. And, we were just having this conversation. Well, a couple weeks later, it happened. Ukraine had put a bunch of autonomous drones, AI-driven drones with explosives in them. Most of these quadcopter drones, pretty simple stuff, and they're in containers that were, they went through various brokers and got them shipped into Russia. And at a certain point, when they were at the right location, the lid, the top, opened up, and these drones took off, and they went and attacked Russian air bases and destroyed about 8% of Russia's strategic bomber force. These are, Tupolev 22 backfires. And, my friends, I'm old enough to remember when I was a kid, I had a bunch of my toy fighter planes. Of course, the F-15 was the best fighter plane toy that you could have. But the plane that it fought with, the plane that it was chasing, were planes like the MiG-25 and the Tupolev 22, the backfire. This plane is, the bear, as the Russians call it. Anyway, these planes are ancient. These are old Soviet planes, and no, they're not in production. These, the Tu-95s, which are turboprop engine planes from way back in the 60s, and these planes are ancient. None of them are being built. They can't replace these planes, and they've been destroyed. Also, these A-30, these radar planes. Now the Russians are saying the planes that were hit were out of service. Of course they were. But the Russia doesn't have many of those, and they need those planes to track incoming aircraft and objects and missiles and whatever trying to attack Russia. So Ukraine really did a great job there. And the Tu-160, this is a supersonic bomber. It's kind of like a B-1. It's not quite as good as the B-1 from about the same era. And while these planes are not a threat to the United States from a strategic point of view, if the Russians loaded nuclear bombs on them and sent them to attack America, the war would be over before they even got over the Arctic. I mean, they would take, 6 to 8 hours for these bombers to reach the United States. By that time, the nuclear, we could have had 2 or 3 rounds of nuclear exchange and the war would be over. So that's not really relevant. If they did reach and we still had forces left, a couple of F-16s could go out and shoot them all down. They're really not that serious a threat to the United States. We're not too worried about them. But they are a serious threat to Europe because they can fire these Kinzel, horizontally launched ballistic missiles, but it's a hypersonic missile. Okay, if you say so. Anyway, they can fire these missiles and they can, cause a lot of damage to Europe. So they're a big problem. Well, Ukraine has eliminated a number of those problems. And that is the first change in the strategic balance, basically, since 2002, when Bush and Putin agreed to reduce arms. Putin didn't really keep to his agreement. He didn't reduce arms like he should have. But the U.S. did reduce our arms, and we've learned that we can't trust the Russians as a result. But this is the first major reduction there. So go Ukraine. Excellent operation. They've done it a couple times more. They hit a train, destroyed 12 tanks. I mean, Ukraine's doing a great job there. It's frustrating to see that our air defenses are being moved away from Ukraine to the Middle East. I grant that we need them. We're talking about reducing aid to Ukraine. This is dangerous, my friends. Putin said he had to respond to this, of course, and his response was firing a bunch of drones and rockets into civilian targets. Trump got on the phone with him and, well, he's got to respond to this. Respond to what? He invaded a country, and Ukraine is responding to the invasion, trying to defend themselves. This is where, why is Trump a simp for Putin? Like, Trump's an alpha, Isaac. Yeah, he's an alpha until he meets Putin. Then he's a beta. And he lets Putin play him. Putin is like that frenemy you have who borrows money from you and never pays you back. Who, can you hit me for the concert tickets? I'll pay you back. But they don't. They mooch and they mooch and they mooch and they get whatever they can, and they're never there when you need them, right? That's not a friend, okay? That's anyway. So, anyway. So Russia responded by attacking Ukrainian civilians, and Ukraine has continued to attack Russia. The Russians aren't making any progress on the front. This war is stagnated. We need to get Ukraine the things it needs to win. The Europeans are stepping up to do that, but the U.S. can't back down either. We look so weak to the Chinese and the Iranians, and we look like a bunch of cowards. Our bellies are yellow. We got to step up and take a tough line on Russia. Anyway, I just so frustrated. Anyway, we had the Polish election. Karol Nawrocki, the new president there, the more right-leaning, the moderate opponent, Trzaskowski, is twice failed presidential elections. He's more of a centrist, but he's center-left, and the nationalists won this one, and now Tusk's government is in trouble. They just had a vote of confidence. Donald Tusk is the prime minister of Poland, and Poland has a mixed presidential parliamentary system. The president has a veto, for example, but the parliament really runs the government. So this has been a big challenge to Tusk's government, but they seem to be holding up. In any case, the more nationalist candidate, still very pro-Ukraine, a little more pro-Trump, just goes to show that Poles are kind of tired of the European establishment and how they're being treated by the European Union. So that's an important thing there. I just wanted to take a note to talk about it. All right, so procurement. Want to talk a little bit about Anduril real quick, and I only have time for one thing. The episode will go long if I don't wrap it up here pretty quick. But I just wanted to note there have been a couple of interviews of Palmer Luckey, the founder, one of the founders of Anduril. Anduril is named after a sword in Lord of the Rings, so it's a loader reference, but it's still pretty cool. But Palmer Luckey has done some interviews lately talking about America being kind of an arsenal of democracy, basically, that we could build a bunch of these drones, send them to our allies overseas, and then they could defeat the bad guys, without Americans having to fight. I like how he thinks. That's basically what I've been saying, right? Anyway, so they've got a couple of cool things. So I'll talk about a couple of those things, and then I'll get to the real one that I want to talk about. They've come up with an underwater drone that is pretty cool, and it could operate independently. It is AI, and it can go out and attack other ships, attack, say, the Chinese Navy or what have you. But they have this autonomous undersea drone. It has a number of torpedoes, and it can run coordinated attacks. And this is the coolest thing. They can run coordinated attacks using acoustic signals. And that's something that I think is really interesting. They communicate with each other. You can't really use radio underwater, right? Water absorbs a lot of different frequencies. You can do some VLF communication. Is basically like you can send a text message, a brief text message. That's how we do our communications with submarines at sea. If you've watched The Hunt for Red October or Crimson Tide or one of those kinds of movies, we're getting something on the VLF, this kind of thing. But they use acoustics, the sound, like whales, to communicate. And they can arrange swarm attacks of torpedoes. It's brilliant. Go check it out. Very cool stuff. They want to work on scalable industries so that they can build up quickly, build all this stuff into, larger manufacture, larger production. That would be good. But they're working on some cool technology. I really like this stuff. I think that, investing in it means that we put fewer humans at risk it protects our guys, and it creates the ability to go after the bad guys. And the bad guys have developed their weapon systems around the idea that they're going to use a whole bunch of cheap stuff, throw a whole bunch of cheap stuff at us and hope that they can damage our very expensive weapons platforms. You damage one Arleigh Burke destroyer, one aircraft carrier. That's a big investment that's been hit. But, we've got to find cheap ways, affordable drones to go out there and hit back and destroy a lot of their cheap junk without putting our people at risk. This is a good thing. What they've got that's really cool, though, and I really want to talk about, is the Fury. It's an autonomous fighter. This is a drone fighter plane designed to fight other fighter planes. And apparently it's pretty good. It's been tested against a few human pilots, and they're starting to. It's pretty effective. So we are soon going to have an autonomous, stealthy drone fighter plane that could go up there with other fighters out there and mix it up. So that's very cool. I checked that out and learn more. I could talk about it a lot of time here, but the episode's gone on long enough. You've heard me jabber on for too long as it is. So with that, I'm going to close out the episode. Please find Mensch-Kight Geopolitics on X. We're getting on YouTube now. I'm trying to, get out there and be in more places, right? And, we'll go from there. But anyway, find me on X. Facebook page now says Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, and you can find me there. So I will say with that, as always, goodbye, Lahitrot.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy. Everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes away. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Show my feet ain't strong.